Do you think freedom is a pile of money, a cool car, and a million followers? But Epictetus, who was born a slave and lived in chains, would tell you that you have shackled yourself to your own desires. He was a slave and became a philosopher who taught that happiness is not in what you have, but in how you relate to it. And you know what? He lived in poverty, without possessions, but was freer than all modern influencers combined. Epictetus said, "Worried about what others think of you. That's your problem, not theirs." Imagine how he would have dismantled the social media culture where people cry over haters. He would have just shrugged and said, "You are the one giving them power over you." In a world where everyone chases likes, Epictetus taught to ignore external noise and control only what is in your head. And he was radically simple. He had neither a house nor possessions, but he was happy. Today, he would be called a freak or a rebel against the system, but he would respond, "I'm not rebelling. I just don't let the system own me." Do you want to know what Epictetus would be like in 2025? How he would troll US politics, comment on the war in Ukraine, or mock the panic over climate crises? Stay until the end. The finale will feature an AI generation with Epictetus's responses to the challenges of the modern world. So who was Epictetus? Let's figure it out. Chapter 1. The main reasons why people still remember him. Epictetus lived around 50 to 135 AD, was a former slave who gained his freedom and became one of the most influential Stoic philosophers. He was born in the province of Hierapolis, now the district of Pamukkale in the province of Denizli, Turkey. It currently has a population of about 350,000 people. He spent his youth in Rome as a slave to a high-ranking official, the secretary to Emperor Nero. To become the secretary's assistant, he was allowed to study literacy, philosophy, and Stoicism under Musonius Rufus. To become famous, at least 3 factors helped him. The first factor: personal qualities and teaching method. Epictetus, within the framework of his philosophy, demonstrated an indomitable will in the face of circumstances, even in the face of his own physical disability. The exact cause of his disability is unknown. According to some accounts, he was born with a leg defect. According to others, his leg was deliberately broken by his owner, Epictetus. Still others believe it was the result of an illness or an untreated fracture. It is reliably known that he limped throughout his entire adult life. And within the framework of his philosophy, he said, lameness is an obstacle for the leg, but not for the will. His teaching method was based on simplicity, clarity of aphorisms, and lively guidance, which he conveyed through his conversations and instructions. The second factor: the preservation of the legacy by the student Arian. The story is somewhat similar to Socrates and his student Plato. You can listen to them in previous videos. When Socrates categorically refused to write down his thoughts, and Plato recorded them for him. And the same goes for Epictetus. We wouldn't know anything about his philosophy if Arian hadn't recorded his discourses in Enchiridion. The third factor: the historical context also influenced the popularity of Epictetus. He lived and worked during the period of rapid reconstruction of the Roman Empire in the second half of the 1st century, early 2nd century CE, when, after long wars and internal conflicts, the empire sought new stability and moral revival. It was during this time that Stoic ethics, focused on inner freedom and self-control, found the ideal ground for dissemination. Epictetus, a former slave from Phrygia, was freed during Nero's reign, received a good education, and under the patronage of Musonius Rufus, gained influence in Rome. That is, a former slave who became part of the new middle class became the ideal figure to crystallize the new image of the new Roman. In a way, he became a symbol of the Roman dream, analogous to the American dream. 2,000 years have passed, and in this regard, the ideas of building empires in the past and federations in the present have changed little. Epictetus was also fortunate that Emperor Domitian, known for his suspicion and authoritarianism, expelled all Stoic philosophers from Rome and Italy. He expelled them because they were in political and ideological opposition to him. They had no choice but to go to the school of Epictetus, which was outside the jurisdiction of the Roman Empire. And so it turns out that in a number of cases, external circumstances greatly influenced the success or decline of various projects. Epictetus also had everything in order regarding the development of social connections. He had loyal students who financed his move and the establishment of the school in Nicopolis, as well as the support of the local civic elite who were interested in philosophical education. The local residents saw prestige in the presence of a Roman philosopher, which added educational and cultural status to the city. The founding of Epictetus' school in Nicopolis marked the beginning of a new center of Stoic thought, where several generations of philosophers from the east of the Roman Empire were educated. The fact that Domitian sought to destroy the Stoic opposition resulted in the spread of Stoicism beyond Rome and Italy. It was in Nicopolis that Arian's discourses and Enchiridion were preserved, which carried Epictetus' teachings into the following centuries. Why exactly Epictetus, and not someone else, became the ideologue of the new philosophy? Unlike the complex polemics of Zeno or Chrysippus, Epictetus spoke the language of the street. Things do not disturb people, but their judgments about things. This concise formula became one of the most quoted definitions of Stoicism and has entered the daily practices of millions of modern followers of the movement. Epictetus did not theorize about freedom. He demonstrated it. He lived in a simple room without luxurious utensils. He taught his students not to quote the sages, but to test their teachings in daily life. He held debates and public discussions not in academies, but right in the streets of Nicopolis, turning the city into a living Stoic school. Thus, Epictetus has been remembered primarily for his unique style, teach by living, not by books, the discourses and Enchiridion written by his student, his historical circumstances, exile and school in Nicopolis, and his personal drama, slavery, disability, and everyday Stoic heroism. This combination made him one of the most revered philosophers in the world, from ancient schools to modern mental health courses. Chapter 2. Interesting facts about Epictetus. His life is full of unexpected twists, from being lame in one leg to meeting emperors, from stealing a lamp to a sea storm in a boat, from an illegally freed slave to the mentor of the future philosopher Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Below are the most interesting, socially sharp, and humorous facts about him. 1. His name in Greek literally means acquired or obtained, a cynical reference to his status as a slave. For context, at that time in Europe, slavery was widespread, and according to various estimates, 70 to 80% of slaves were white Europeans. Only 5% were dark-skinned, and the rest were Arabs. 2. Epictetus was the slave of Epictetus, Nero's secretary. The young Epictetus ended up in Rome with Epictetus, a wealthy freedman of Emperor Nero, who personally assisted the emperor in taking his own life in 68 AD. Nero did not dare to stab himself. It was Epictetus, according to reports, who might have deliberately broken Epictetus's leg to tame the stubborn nature of the future Stoic. 3. Limping all his life, Epictetus turned his disability into a symbol of Stoic resilience. In the Enchiridion, he commands, "Fragility is an obstacle for the foot, but not for the will. When you stumble, tell yourself, this concerns the foot, but the will remains free." For after Nero's suicide in 68 AD, Epictetus freed Epictetus, who had studied Stoicism for many years under the guidance of Musonius Rufus, the renowned rural Stoic from Samos. 5. Although he himself had no children, in the name of mercy, Epictetus adopted an infant whose parents had abandoned him, a living proof of his teaching on duty towards others. 6. In Arrian's discourses, there is an anecdote about how Epictetus's iron lamp, expensive at that time, was stolen at night. Instead, the philosopher did not get angry, but said, "Tomorrow I'll buy a clay one, but ask yourself, why did you steal something valuable instead of something cheap?" 7. Despite the ban on philosophers in Rome under Emperor Domitian 89 AD, Epictetus founded a school in Nicopolis and hosted the future Emperor Hadrian, who asked him about the nature of the world and virtue in 50 questions in a text, Altercatio Hadriani et Epicteti. Here are examples of questions and answers from this dialogue. Question: what is a letter? Answer: silent messenger. Explanation: Epictetus compares a letter to a courier that conveys the message but remains silent itself. Question: what is a painting? Answer: a deceptive truth. Explanation: in the text, he clarifies, we see painted fruits, flowers, and metal, but this is not real, just a copy. Question number 31. Who is a poor man? Answer: like a dried-up well, everyone looks at it and immediately walks away. Context: a sharp social joke about the marginalization of poverty. It looks like not much has changed in 2,000 years. Question number 32. What is a human? Answer: similar to a bathhouse. In the first room, a child. Next, childhood. Then the steam room, maturity. Finally, the cold bath, old age, which gives a fair conclusion. Explanation: a vivid metaphor of the life cycle, with Chinese meticulousness of rooms. Question: What is gold? Answer: the master of death. Translation. Explanation. Gold for Epictetus is a symbol of power that does not save from the inevitability of death. 8. Marcus Aurelius ruled Rome from 161 to 180 AD, called Epictetus his spiritual mentor, and in the Meditations he quoted his Enchiridion as a guide for imperial duty and inner freedom. Here are examples of what these teachings were about. Epictetus begins with the principle: some things depend on us, others do not. He emphasizes that our freedom lies in the ability to let go of desires and fears related to external events and to focus on our own judgments and actions. Development of resilience and wisdom. In a series of instructions, Chapter 8, Chapter 20, the philosopher advises preparing for difficulties by imagining the worst possible outcome, so as not to succumb to their pressure and to maintain peace of mind. Duty and social role. Epictetus urges to perform one's natural role diligently, whether as a citizen, soldier, or ruler. He believes that true greatness lies in virtue, not status. You are a son, a husband, a citizen. Fulfill your duty with reason and dignity. If you don't know who you are, don't know what you're doing, and don't fulfill your role, then you are an empty space. And who you should be will be told to you by other people. Those who know their place and your place in their system of the world. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most outstanding Roman emperors. He preferred the Meditations over all other texts, using its aphorisms as personal mantras before military councils and the daily challenges of managing the empire. It was largely these principles that ensured the successes of Aurelius's campaigns and of Rome as a whole. Short and clear points were convenient for daily reminders. It was enough to keep the guidance with you to refer to it at any moment and restore inner balance. Even today, leaders and managers of various fields use the guidance as a manual for self-control, ethical leadership, and stress management. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Soon on this channel. Soon, a video with Epictetus instructions will be released on this channel. A perfect text to listen to before bed or with headphones during a workout. Guidance serves as a spiritual and practical reference. It forms a resilient inner core regardless of external circumstances and simultaneously directs towards the diligent fulfillment of one's duties to family, community, and state. Chapter 3. His contribution to science, culture, and civilization as a whole. Epictetus's influence has stretched from the Roman Empire to modern universities. His Enchiridion became a personal guide for Marcus Aurelius in battles and state decisions. His ideas influenced Hellenistic culture and later Islamic thinkers through Al-Kindi and the Church Fathers. Medieval manuscripts preserve his texts despite occasional attempts at censorship. Enlightenment figures, Voltaire, Pascal, quoted him, and at Stanford and Harvard universities. Epictetus's Stoicism is taught in ethics and rhetoric courses. Today, his dichotomy of control underlies cognitive behavioral therapy and leadership methods in leading companies. His contribution to the Roman Empire. Marcus Aurelius and the battles on the Marne. Epictetus's aphorisms from the Discourses became the Emperor Marcus Aurelius's bedside book during the Marcomannic Wars, the Siege of Amycia, 172 to 173 AD, when he turned to the advice of separating thoughts from external circumstances. Mark used Stoic practice in the Meditations, referring to Epictetus's teachings as a source of inner resilience before crucial military decisions. Trajan's administrative reforms. Under the influence of Stoic ethics, through the mediation of Marcus Aurelius, Emperor Trajan, reigned 98 to 117 CE, implemented social welfare reforms for veterans and colonists, guided by the principles of justice and fulfilling one's duty from the Meditations. Influence on Greek history and culture. The school in Nicopolis as a center of Hellenistic education. After the expulsion of philosophers from Rome by Domitian 89 AD, Epictetus' school in Nicopolis, Epirus, became an unofficial university of the Greek East, attracting students from Asia Minor and Athens. There, they collectively analyzed Arrian's discourses, shaping the later Greek tradition of ethical dialogues and creating a local cultural center. Neoplatonist commentaries. In the 6th century, the Neoplatonist Simplicius wrote a commentary on the Enchiridion, thereby integrating Stoicism into late Hellenistic philosophy. The combination of conciseness, practical orientation, and an active commentary tradition made Epictetus's philosophy a beloved and integral part of late Hellenistic thought. In the introduction, Simplicius asserts that Epictetus's lessons will make those who accept them happy without promises of otherworldly blessings, and the comparison of bodily and non-bodily bliss corresponds to the Neoplatonic scheme of degrees of being. Thanks to Simplicius's commentaries, Epictetus's excerpts entered the academic circulation of Byzantium, becoming part of the Platonic Aristotelian courses in the palace schools. Epictetus proclaimed that philosophy is the art of living, not an abstract science, which made him influential among rhetoricians and moral teachers from the 2nd century AD. It was precisely practical solutions that were the aspects sorely lacking in the overly theoretical philosophy of that time. Epictetus also influenced the Arab world. The Arab scholar al-Kindi, 9th century, adapted Epictetus's ideas in treatises on inner freedom and control over desires, creating an early bridge between Stoicism and Islamic ethics. His works reached the Andalusian schools, where Stoic traits were correlated with the philosophy of Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina. Epictetus also played a role in the formation of early Christianity. Origen, 3rd century, used the Stoic teachings of Epictetus to explain Christian asceticism, citing him as more popular than Plato. The authors of the Apology mentioned Stoic arguments about self-control as precursors to the Christian idea of inner freedom. Boethius integrated the Stoic motives of Epictetus into his treatise, preserving the ideas of judgment and inner freedom. And already in the Middle Ages, Raphael included the image of Epictetus in the School of Athens, 1509 to 1511, as a symbol of practical ethics. In the Enlightenment-era French philosophers Voltaire and Pascal considered the Enchiridion essential reading, calling Epictetus a great mind for understanding duty, while Denis Diderot and Baron d'Orbach included Stoic rules in their etiquette manuals. Epictetus is studied in modern universities as well. For example, at Harvard in the course Phil E166D, Introduction to Ethics, Harvard Extension School, Spring 2022, Stoicism is allocated 4 lecture hours on the concept of the dichotomy of control. And in the Phil 110 Ancient Philosophy course at Stanford, they cover Epictetus over 6 hours of lectures throughout the semester, including comparisons with Plato and Aristotle. Modern practical applications of Epictetus's ideas and philosophy. 1. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. The foundations of CBT are based on Epictetus's dichotomy of control, the distinction between thoughts and external circumstances. Epictetus's dichotomy of control forms the basis of one of the key techniques in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, distinguishing between what depends on us, thoughts, perceptions, reactions, and what does not depend on us, external events, actions of others, weather, etc. How does it work? 1. Identification of automatic thought. Imagine you are stuck in traffic on your way to an important meeting. Your initial judgment: this is terrible, I'm going to be late, and my boss will fire me. 2. Distinction of control. Specifically, the division of things into those that depend on us and those that are uncontrollable. For example, does not depend on you, traffic jam, weather, behavior of other drivers. Depends on you, your interpretation, this is terrible, reaction, anger, panic, as well as the choice of alternatives, call, inform about the delay. 3. Cognitive restructuring. The therapist in CBT helps change the initial judgment to a more adaptive one. I can't control the traffic jam, but I can inform my boss, calm down, and prepare for the meeting remotely. 4. Behavioral activation. Instead of futile outrage, you act within your control, making a call, reviewing your agenda, or listening to a podcast to stay calm. In a study with patients suffering from generalized anxiety disorder, CBT with clear control isolation proved to be significantly more effective than placebo and equally effective as pharmacotherapy, but with better long-term outcomes. What about the effectiveness of such techniques and approaches? Depression, moderate to large effect size compared to various control conditions. The effect lasts up to 12 months. Anxiety. A meta-analysis showed a moderate reduction in anxiety symptoms compared to no treatment. Social anxiety. CBT therapy proved to be more effective than antidepressants and guaranteed a lower level of relapse. Epictetus's dichotomy of control provides a clear strategy, focused not on external circumstances, but on your own judgments and actions. This very idea has transformed into one of the most powerful CBT techniques, which has a proven track record of effectiveness in treating anxiety and depressive disorders. The second modern application of Epictetus's approaches and philosophy is in the field of leadership and entrepreneurship. For example, Donald Robertson's book Stoicism for Leaders actively uses Epictetus's teachings to enhance managers' stress resilience. Here are 3 key, specific, and practical exercises from Donald Robertson's book Stoicism for Leaders, based on Epictetus's teachings, that allow managers to enhance their resilience and effectiveness. 1. Training self-control through limiting desires. The essence of the exercise, you choose a simple but voluntary discomfort. For example, one day a week you drink only water, no coffee, no juice, eat simple food, and avoid small indulgences, turnkey voluntary discomfort. How it works. You train the ability to restrain excessive desires, focus on inner peace, and resist temptations. When a crisis actually arises, a traffic jam, a server failure, a team conflict, the primal impulse of irritation weakens because you have already trained yourself to accept limitations. Practical result: the leader withstands unexpected blows without panic. The team follows his calmness, which increases collective productivity and reduces staff turnover. 2. The dichotomy of control and decision-making. The essence of the exercise: before making an important decision, stressful meeting, public speech, merger with another business, clearly outline 2 columns. A controlled by you, preparing a report, structuring arguments, tone of voice. A not controlled, audience reaction, stock prices, technical glitches. How it works. By focusing only on the first column, you expend energy on real actions and minimize futile worries. Practical result: less procrastination and analysis paralysis. Quick decision-making in a crisis, for example, IT failures or unexpected inspections by regulatory bodies. Reducing the stress level in the team, as the leader demonstrates a clear, calm action plan. 3. Premeditatio malorum, preparation for misfortune. The essence of the exercise: dedicate 5 to 10 minutes each week to visualize the worst-case scenarios that could happen to your project or business: losing a key client, political instability, natural disaster. Then imagine how you would react according to the principles. 1. Accept the fact the matter is already in the past. 2. You plan specific steps: team communication, searching for alternative markets, crisis communication plan. 3. You refocus on what can still be done now. How it works. Regular rehearsals of emotional responses to crises reduce the shock effect during real emergencies and increase the speed of returning to normal functioning. Practical result: your decisions in emergency situations become thoughtful, not emotionally impulsive. The team sees that the leader is prepared for the worst and feels confident in the leadership. The downtime of projects is reduced, and the trust of investors and partners is increasing. These 3 exercises, voluntary limitations, the dichotomy of control, and premeditatio malorum, allow for the application of Epictetus's teachings without excessive philosophical theory, directly fostering resilience, clarity of thought, and the ability to quickly adapt in the modern business environment. Epictetus's Stoicism had a place in contemporary mass culture. Stoicism is experiencing a true internet renaissance today. Its aphorisms: control only what is in your power, fragility is an obstacle for the foot, not for the will, have become templates for memes worldwide, from South Korea and Russia to California and Brazil. On social media, Stoic maxims are superimposed on scenes from popular movies or video games, joking about when your boss calls again on your day off and balancing toxic positivity, be happy, by offering instead cold calmness and a rational approach to life screw-ups. Thus, Stoicism has transformed into a universal culture code for survival in the digital age, where memes are the new preachers of self-control and emotional resilience. Chapter 4. 10 of his main ideas that are false or absurd. Despite the appealing simplicity of the art of living in Epictetus's teachings, many of his key ideas turn out to be problematic or even absurd in light of modern scientific knowledge, primarily in the fields of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, emotion psychology, and social psychiatry. Below are the 10 most radical points with a brief critique of each. 1. Sneaky suppression of emotions. Epictetus's idea: emotions are the fault of our judgments. They should be ignored or nipped in the bud. Problem: research shows that suppressing emotions leads to increased physiological stress and deterioration of mental health, elevated cortisol levels, risk of depression. 2. The universal dichotomy of control. Epictetus's idea: everything falls into what depends on us and what does not depend on us. Problem: modern CBT indicates that many important factors do not fall into the category of full control, but rather on a continuum of influence. For example, health, relationships, social processes. A clear dichotomy can distort realities and create frustration. 3. Passive acceptance of any injustice. Epictetus's idea: it is worth accepting external circumstances as they are, without fighting against them. Problem: such an approach can justify political and social inequality. Tyranny is just a fact of life, and to motivate collective actions against systemic issues. 4. Ignoring the middle zones of influence. Epictetus's idea: focus only on full control. Everything else is not yours. Problem: psychologists note that people can influence but not control, for example, surrounding relationships, professional projects. Ignoring these zones of influence leads to a decrease in one's agency and motivation. 5. Rejection of positive emotions. Epictetus's idea: feelings of joy or sorrow regarding uncontrollable things are futile judgments. Problem: modern research on emotions proves that the adaptive evaluation of the value of unchangeable circumstances, for example, enjoying a sunny day, contributes to emotional well-being rather than hindering it. 6. Virtue as the only path to happiness. Epictetus's idea: moral virtue is a necessary and sufficient condition for happiness. Problem: clinical data show that social connections, genetics, and physiological factors play an equally significant role in preventing depression. Solely acting with virtue does not guarantee the absence of mental disorders. 7. Denial of the role of heredity. Epictetus's idea: everything is under the control of the soul, no genetic influences. Problem: modern psychology proves that 40 to 60% of the risk of anxiety and depressive disorders can be explained by heredity. Willpower cannot always compensate for biological predispositions. 8. The delusive belief in providence. Epictetus's idea: everything that happens is by the will of the universal mind, providence. Problem: in secular reality, this thesis appears unfounded. Belief in fatalism can exacerbate helplessness, especially when it comes to real disasters or crimes. Accepting will does not prevent fighting against them. 9. The ideal of solitude and asceticism. Epictetus's idea: sometimes it's better to withdraw from society to preserve inner peace. The problem: meta-analyses confirm that chronic loneliness and social isolation increase the risk of mortality by 26%, similar to smokers, and are associated with depression and anxiety. 10. The call for absolute self-sufficiency. Epictetus's idea: one should rely only on oneself, no asking for help. Problem: research in psychotherapy shows that those who can ask for support achieve better results than those who try to handle everything on their own. Extreme self-reliance leads to feelings of isolation and worsens treatment outcomes. Thus, modern evidence-based science, CBT, psychiatry, social psychology, shows that many Epictetus's postulates require updating or adjustment considering the nuances of human psyche and social interactions. Simple aphorisms often fail to capture the complexity of modern life, and blind adherence to them can lead to emotional burnout, social isolation, and even deterioration of mental health. Chapter 5. What were his political and ideological views? Epictetus was not an active politician and always avoided official positions, but his ideological views clearly stemmed from classical Stoicism. The priority of inner virtue over external institutions, belief in the divine providence of the cosmos, and the duty to fulfill one's natural role in society. To understand Epictetus's political and ideological position, one must understand the era in which he lived. He lived during the time when the first Flavian emperor Vespasian, 69–79, established a harsh centralized power, which was continued by Titus and Domitian. The Stoics, led by Musonius Rufus, criticized tyranny and lawlessness, which led to the exile of philosophers during Domitian's reign around 93 AD. After the death of Domitian, Nerva restored a more moderate rule. It was during this time that Epictetus received permission to establish a school in Nicopolis, and Hadrian, 117–138, became his supporter, possibly due to a deep interest in Stoic ethics. Ideologically, Epictetus advocated for the priority of inner freedom and self-control over external institutions. His teaching of things that depend on us versus things that do not depend on us organizes individual responsibility as the foundation of political behavior. Roughly speaking, Epictetus said that it is not so important who the ruler is. It is much more important how a person lives for themselves. And self-control is the key parameter that one must think about and work on. And politicians and rulers are secondary and tertiary. Epictetus did not belong to any elite circles or factions, avoided participation in the popular assemblies, and held no official positions. At the same time, Epictetus was significantly dependent on the favor of the rulers. For example, his protector was Epictetus, a Roman freedman under Nero, and later, the friendly relations with Emperor Hadrian provided the philosopher with security in Nicopolis. As is typical for Stoics, he believed in a divine logic governed by the cosmos and asserted, Live according to nature and fulfill your duty to society. A modern analogy of Epictetus would be a classical liberal individualist, an advocate of limited power and effective state institutions, but always emphasizing personal responsibility and inner virtue. His worldview would be situated in the libertarian or classical liberal part of the political spectrum, with a focus on minimal state intervention in private life and maximum personal freedom. Chapter 6. How did he treat women, and what did he say about them? Epictetus noted that women, since society values them for their beauty, only take care of it, but if they had access to philosophy, they would show thinking no worse than men. Even 2,000 years ago, women were subjected to strict beauty standards reflected in the ideal of Chalcogagathia, beautiful and good, where attractive facial features and body proportions were considered evidence of inner virtue. These notions standardized appearance, the Greek profile, large eyes, and the golden ratio in Polykleitos statues imposed on women the task of strictly adhering to a single ideal. Social validation, kaliskagathos, meant that physical beauty was equated with moral purity. In other words, a woman was considered virtuous only if she conformed to external standards. In the public life of Athens, female beauty was celebrated by poets and depicted on vases, but at the same time, women were strictly forbidden from leaving the domestic sphere to avoid tarnishing the reputation of the polis. This duality, adoration of beauty, and the isolation of women, intensified their vulnerability. Social value hinged on appearance, while education and intellect were devalued. In such a climate, Epictetus sharply distanced himself from this paradigm, emphasizing that women's participation in philosophy would open up to them no less thinking than men and free them from the constraints of bodily validation. Modern gender studies show that even today, many societies remain captive to visual standards. Women's magazines and social networks offer endless algorithms of the ideal form, which demean diversity and the perception of female individuality. Epictetus's critique of ancient beauty standards resonates with contemporary ideas of body positivity. He would support the movement for recognizing women's intellectual achievements and inner virtues over standardized appearance, for true human worth, in his view, lies in the strength of one's will and judgment, not in facial symmetry or figure allure. Epictetus, as a Stoic philosopher, emphasized the importance of inner virtue and self-control. In his works, he highlighted that women, starting from the age of 14, often focus on external attractiveness, as society primarily evaluates them based on this criterion. He believed that women should strive for modesty, decency, and prudence, as these qualities are true virtues worth developing. Thus, Epictetus urged women not to limit themselves to mere external attributes, but to focus on inner improvement and the development of the mind. Regarding physical strength, Epictetus acknowledged that the body is limited and subject to external circumstances, but emphasized that true strength lies in the ability to control one's desires and emotions. He believed that excessive focus on the physical aspects of life, such as food, clothing, or sexual pleasures, distracts from the development of the mind and soul. Thus, Epictetus stressed that regardless of physical characteristics, every person has the potential to achieve inner freedom and virtue through self-discipline and philosophical thinking. Regarding his relationships with the opposite sex, there is no reliable evidence of his wife or direct descendants. However, within the framework of his philosophy, he urged to love one's wife and children with all one's heart, but always to remember their mortality in order to soften the pain of loss. Phrases like weaker body or allusions to mandatory obedience could be perceived as patriarchal and provoke criticism from modern feminists. If we take the polar views of modern radical feminists and Andrew Tate as a polar traditionalist and introduce a scale from 0 to 100, where radical feminism is 0 and Andrew Tate is 100, where would Epictetus be on this scale? Artificial intelligence tells us that Epictetus would score 30 out of 100. He was not a sexist in the strict sense. He acknowledged women's ability to engage in philosophy, but some phrases might seem patriarchal. On the political spectrum, his worldview is closer to libertarian individualism rather than radical feminism or traditional masculinist rhetoric. Chapter 7. The generation of artificial intelligence. What would it be like in the 21st century? If Epictetus lived in the 21st century, his journey from slave to recognized philosopher could be compared to the story of a person who, despite a difficult background and social barriers, achieved success through self-discipline, deep thinking, and the ability to influence others through their ideas. Perhaps he would be a popular author, motivational speaker, or even the founder of an educational platform promoting Stoic philosophy and psychological resilience. Social media and his audience. Although Epictetus would likely be skeptical of social media as a source of superficial entertainment, he could use it as a tool to spread his ideas. His content would focus on self-awareness, emotional control, and the development of inner virtue. His audience would consist of people seeking deeper meaning in life, striving for personal growth, and resilience in the face of modern world challenges. He would promote inner freedom, self-control, and virtue. He would be skeptical of excessive preoccupation with politics and external circumstances. Considering the current trends among motivational speakers, one can assume the following. Instagram, about 1 million followers. YouTube, approximately 1.5 million subscribers. In it, his students and assistants would spread his lectures. Twitter, X, about 500,000 followers. In this social network, he would post quotes that would mostly be copied by guys and men. LinkedIn, approximately 300,000 followers. These figures correspond to the average metrics for popular motivational speakers, such as Jay Shetty or Robin Sharma, who have between 1 to 2 million followers on various platforms. His content would likely consist of short videos with philosophical reflections, quotes, and practical advice on self-control and inner freedom. Epictetus's audience would include people interested in personal development, philosophy, and psychology. Thus, Epictetus in the 21st century would be an influential thinker with a significant but not excessive presence on social media, focusing on the quality of content and profound ideas rather than the number of followers. Regarding his income and acquired wealth, if Epictetus lived in the 21st century, his financial status could be assessed based on the earnings of contemporary motivational speakers and authors. Mid-level motivational speakers earn between $2,500 and $10,000 per appearance. Top-tier speakers earn over $25,000 per event, and elite speakers earn over $100,000 per appearance. Epictetus would be an elite motivational speaker. If Epictetus gave 50 speeches a year with an average payment of $100,000, his annual income would be around $5 million. A few more $1 million a year he could earn from royalties on his books and monetization from his social media. However, Epictetus did not strive for or chase after material values. For example, the top speaker of modern times, Tony Robbins, with his wealth exceeding hundreds of millions of dollars. Epictetus would turn a blind eye to and ignore many monetization options for his activities. He wouldn't hold 50 paid seminars a year. He would hold significantly fewer. The monetization from social media and book publishing would largely go to his managers. However, even with this, he would still have a few $1 million in his accounts. Considering Stoic philosophy, Epictetus would likely not have sought the accumulation of wealth for its own sake. His main goal was the dissemination of knowledge and helping people achieve inner harmony. Thus, in the modern world, Epictetus could be a successful motivational speaker and author with a stable income and moderate wealth, focused on the impact of his ideas rather than financial enrichment. Views on contemporary socio-political issues. Epictetus emphasized the importance of inner freedom and self-control. He believed that true freedom lies not in external circumstances, but in the ability to control one's reactions and judgments. Therefore, he would likely encourage people to focus on developing their own character and virtue, rather than overly worrying about political events that often lie beyond our control. Political preferences. Epictetus would not support any political party or leader, as he believed that external circumstances should not determine our inner well-being. He would likely call for caution regarding political passions and emphasize the importance of maintaining inner peace and virtue regardless of the political situation. He would probably not participate in elections, as he would see no sense in it. He would say that one should focus on their own choice over themselves, rather than the illusion of choice in the Oval Office. Epictetus, as a Stoic, will have a unique perspective on contemporary issues such as U.S. politics, the war in Ukraine, and climate crises. His philosophy focused on the idea that a person can only control their thoughts, emotions, and actions, not external circumstances. So let's take a closer look at how he might troll or comment on these phenomena based on his Stoic principles. How would Epictetus troll U.S. politics? Epictetus would likely look at American politicians with a certain irony and sarcasm. He would criticize their obsession with external things, power, wealth, prestige, and point out the futility of these pursuits. Imagine him saying something like, "Oh, great rulers of America, you chase after golden votes like dogs chasing their own tails. And what do you gain? More trouble than peace. Why not work on what is truly within your power, your own wisdom? But no, you prefer to complain about opponents and build castles in the sand." He would troll them, highlighting the absurdity of how they waste energy on things they can't fully control: voters' opinions, economic fluctuations, or international image. Instead, he would advise them to focus on internal virtue and self-discipline, mocking their dependence on external approval. How would he comment on the war in Ukraine? Regarding the war in Ukraine, Epictetus would not delve into geopolitical details or blame the parties involved in the conflict. His approach would be simple and straightforward. External conflicts are beyond our control and therefore not worth excessive worry. He would probably address those who are distressed by the war with words like, "Are you crying over cannons and ruins? But tell me, can you stop a shell with your hand? No? Then why do you let it shatter your peace as well? Focus on what is within your control, help if you can, or accept if you cannot." He would urge people not to waste their energy on powerless anger or despair, but to look for ways to act where possible, for example, by supporting others or maintaining their own resilience. His comment would be less about trolling and more about a stern reminder of the limits of human influence. How would he mock the panic over climate crises? Climate crises are the perfect target for Epictetus's Stoic humor. He would likely laugh at those who panic over weather changes or natural disasters, pointing out their helplessness against nature. Imagine his words. "O mortals, you cry that the sky is angry and the oceans are rising. And what will you do? Command the wind to stop. Tie the clouds to the ground. You cannot change nature, but you can change your tears into wisdom. Adapt, live simply, or continue to tremble. It's your choice." He would mock the idea that humanity can fully control the climate and would instead call for focusing on practical actions, reducing wastefulness, adapting to changes. His trolling would be aimed at emotional excess, not the problem itself, emphasizing that calmness and rationality are better than chaotic anxiety. Epictetus's general approach. In all these cases, Epictetus would remain true to his philosophy. U.S. politics, trolling for vanity and external fuss. War in Ukraine, focus on internal response, not external chaos. Climate crises, mocking panic with a focus on adaptation. His style would be sharp, but with humor aimed at bringing people back to what is truly in their hands. He would not just criticize, but also offer an alternative, calm, thoughtful resilience in the face of an uncontrollable world. This is the kind of man Epictetus was. Are Epictetus's ideas close to you? When did you first hear about Stoicism? It would be interesting to read your thoughts. If you liked it, please give a thumbs up and subscribe. This will help promote the channel. I will keep trying. We have many more interesting stories and characters lined up. By the way, you can write in the comments about whom else you would like to see a similar analysis lecture on, which you can comfortably listen to before bed, while cooking, with headphones at the gym, or in the car on the way to work. Glad to strive for you. And my effort lies in making the content both interesting and useful at the same time. This is one of the principles of happiness that Professor Tal Ben-Shahar talked about in his Harvard course on the psychology of happiness. See you in the next videos.